Hello, and welcome to our video audio podcast, Couched in Color. I'm your mental health expert, teen and young adult crusader, and psychological scientist, Dr. Alfiee. This podcast reflects my life's work, helping our young people and young at heart identify mental health challenges, disrupt negative patterns, and discover the best versions of themselves. I'm so happy that you've joined us. For over 20 years, I want you to know that I've had my finger on the pulse of BIPOC teen mental health. I recognize that historically and currently, with these dual pandemics of COVID and racial injustice raging, our young people are suffering, sometimes they're struggling, and always the care that they need is quite scarce. So each week, I'm joined by young people, mental health experts, celebrities, and influencers to help us uncover the secrets to healing the hearts and minds of our BIPOC teens, their families, and their communities. Here at Couched in Color, we believe deeply in spreading love and light, bolstered by culturally relevant science. So let's dive in. So welcome everybody to Couched in Color with Dr. Alfiee. It is my pleasure to introduce my guest, who is someone who's been a friend of mine since I was a little kid, like honestly, since I was a child. So y'all know how I always talk about Virginia Beach, and I have my issues with Virginia Beach. I love the oceanfront and I love the Neptune Festival, but we're not going to talk about public school system. Anyway, we had that conversation another day at another time. So my guest is Dr. Charles Corprew. I have to say, I know him as Chucky when we were little kids. But out of respect, I'm going to say Dr. Corprew today, Dr. Charles. And I would just love for my guest, you, Dr. Corprew, to introduce yourself to our guests here on Couched in Color and let us know a little bit about you and your work.
Thank you. If we really want to get like down to it, it can just be Alfiee and Chucky. We don't have to put all the formalities on it at all, So I'm grateful to be here with you as this amazing host talked about. I'm Dr. Charles Corprew, a native of Virginia Beach, a stallion through and through. I always got a stallion through and through. Green Run High School class of '89 is at the core of who I am, and will take, my worldview and how I see the world was shaped there. I'm a man on a journey. I'm a man who wants to talk about revolution, but not the revolution that we see in the world, but the revolution that we have within ourselves. I said everyone has the ability to transform their lives. And particularly Black men, we have this opportunity to look within ourselves and say, how can I be better? How can I be the best and healthiest version of ourselves? And that's what I do every day, whether it's my podcast, the What's Your Revolution podcast, or it's working with CamelBack Ventures, started by Aaron Walker, where I get to help women and people of color who are catalyzing their ventures out here in the world, who are helping Black and indigenous people of color thrive, build communities, and actually provide livable wage jobs for us so our communities can be the best they can be. So that's who I am, Doc. I'm a work in progress, trying to figure out what it means to be 50 and single and being able to sit down in the world and try to get to zero, as you say. What does zero look like in this fast-paced world?
Wow. So listening to you, like just thinking about the arc, because, it's hard to separate us now from who we were as kids, right? And so like the baseball field that was across from where you grew up, and the Hardee's that was on the corner near where I grew up, right? Amberley Forest. We shout out Amberley Forest and the whole crew from back then, and walking back and forth to school. I would pass I can picture walking down, I don't even know what that street was, going towards Green Run and looking to the right, and y'all's house was like right there in that, like I can see all of that. And so to think about, this is where we are now. You're the same age as my spouse. So my spouse is younger than me. He finished in '89. Yeah. And just think about the arc. And then to hear you say, blah, 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 50. I'm like, wait a minute, Chucky ain't 50. Who you talking about? That ain't not my Chucky. He ain't 50. Given that I'm over 50, but we ain't gonna go there either.
You look good.
Thank you. So do you. So do you.
Black
so do you.
Don't crack. Come on.
Hi, come through. So I just wonder about, obviously our podcast is about mental health, and I think mental health is a big part of anybody's revolution. So, right. So if that mental health, your behavioral health is not intact, it's kind of hard to identify what your revolution is going to be. And then once you identify it, it's hard to walk that path. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, how did you come to this idea of what's your revolution? Because I know you said that it's really important to you I'm going to paraphrase, to identify that for yourself and then to move forward in that path, right? Your own personal
Yes.
revolution. What was the evolution of that for you, and how did that become something that was very meaningful to you, your own revolution, and then helping other people identify and illuminate and talk about their own personal revolutions?
No, it's a great question. It's a great question. I want to say, Alfie, Doc, you know, the impetus for just the question itself really came from listening to Tom Friedman at my graduation from Tulane in 2011 talk about the revolutions that were going on in Tahrir Square and how it was the greatest opportunity for us as a people here in the States to think about, we're going through a recession, but it's the greatest opportunity for us to transform ourselves and to transform our communities. So as I'm sitting there listening to Tom Friedman, I'm asking myself, what's my revolution? What's my change in the world? And for so long, even my dissertation research, the work that I did when I was teaching at Green Run had been about Black men, uplifting the conversations and uplifting us as a people, as a race and a gender of people to ensure that we were thriving in the world. But I realized, Doc, that I couldn't be this beacon of light for someone else if I hadn't done the work. And I say this all the time, like this public persona of Dr. Corprew was not mirrored by the internal persona that I was leading out in the world, you know. And if you think about, you know, you ask the women of my past, they'd be like, this dude is out here talking about uplifting Black men, and he's a dog. He's, you know, he's not treating us well. He's not doing the things that he says out in the world. And Alfie, I remember distinctly, you know, sitting on my ex-girlfriend's porch, you know, after having this long, arduous night with her and her realizing some of the things that I had been doing and saying, you know what, I just don't want to be with you. And I'm sitting on this porch and I got to wait for an Uber 45 minutes. I've been kicked out of the house, right? I've been kicked out of the house, Alfie.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And I've got to wait 45 minutes because she's like, you're not coming back in my house. And so I'm sitting there thinking, like, you're talking about revolution, you're talking about change, you're assisting men, you're coaching men, but below this, you're not the example. And it's like, you've got to make this change. And I remember blocking her on everything and saying, you know what, I can't do this with you anymore. I can't do this. And I'm like, what's the change? You can't lie anymore. You can't deceive. You can't be this nefarious person who is taking advantage of people who are good to you. And so my revolution began. And unfortunately, it began 3 years ago. Right. And I hate to say that. I hate to say that I'm a 46-year-old man saying, you know, I don't want to be this. But as you know, as a psychologist, development is not a static thing. And so
That's right.
I began to do this inward work around my own revolution, like saying, okay, I wanted to be a better man. And as one of my last guests said, Osaze Murray, Pastor Osaze Murray, I want to spend more hours of integrity than I want to spend more hours of dishonesty. Think about that. That hit so hard, right?
Yep.
I want to spend more hours of integrity than more hours of dishonesty. And that was really my road. I said, you know what? I'm not going to lie anymore. I'm going to take up this road. I'm going to be like healthier. I'm going to take care of my mental. If I get into a relationship, I'm going to say, these are the things I want. These are the things that I can give. And it was so revolutionary. It was so transformative because when I started telling the truth, Alfie, the world opened up. It was different. And then interesting because I listened to other men tell these stories about their relationships with either men or women and how they're comporting themselves. And I was comporting myself the same way. And I was like, ooh, I know how this is going to end. I was like, and you feel like, yeah, bro, you can't do this anymore. And that has been my revolution with my show, is to have this podcast where I hear men who are not only transforming themselves in relationships in their lives, but they're giving themselves in service of others. I think about Cornell Belcher. I think about Martin Ekachuku, who's worked with Puffy, who's one of the great ad techs, ad executives of this country, who gave a master class on the show, but talks about being in service of others. I think about Dr. Anthony Purdue, who talks about how to live a purpose-driven life and still being in service of others. And so that's what I try to do with my podcast, even with myself. People saying, hey, Charles has changed his life. I know he's not going to treat women like this. I know he's going to show up differently. And I want to be better. I want to be the best version of myself. So that has been my revolution, being able to have conversations with Black and men of color who are saying, I transform my life, right? I show up better, and this is how. And I love it. I love it. I appreciate the question.
Ah, everything about that is just, it's deep and it's thoughtful and it's honest and it's transparent. And I think coming from a Black man, it's just hearing the arc of the story can be very healing. I'm just going to be real for a lot of sisters, because there are so many, I think, who struggle with their interpersonal relationships, whatever those are, with brothers, right? And I think about young women because my passion is young people. I think about high school kids, my own daughter, and I think about college age young women, and how so often in clinical care, I will hear these conversations about, I'm trying to negotiate. I'm thinking about one high school student I treated over the summer where she was really struggling with, I really don't know what to do with this brother, right? Because one day he's like, seems like he's in it. I can just hear her. It's a beautiful little girl, brilliant child. The next day he's like, I don't know what's going on with that brother. And so, for her, and she has a healthy relationship with her dad and everything. And so for her, just thinking about her and some of the other women I've encountered and thinking about that struggle, to hear a Black man say, I wanted my life to be different. I wanted a life that was more bound up with integrity, right, than it was bound up in causing pain or trying to, just trying to unravel stuff that I've done. And so for me, I really appreciate you being that honest and open. People aren't always willing to be that open. And I think the other thing that it makes me think of is this idea of change and like the roots, the seeds of change. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, and then also I've heard you mention a couple of times your podcast, and the focus is on brothers, which I think is wonderful because men need a space where they can be themselves, right? And they can talk to each other. But if you could just talk a little bit about, maybe there are some themes that you've heard from over the years, because I know you've been doing your podcast for 3 or 4 years now, that really tie together this idea of what sparks change, what sparks Black men and men of colors, what sparks people's revolutions. If there's anything that you've heard over the years through all the interviews you've done on your podcast. Yeah.
The interesting thing, what usually sparks revolution is this, as you heard in my story, there's an event. And you think about this from a psychological perspective. Like there's a catalytic event in people's lives. And oftentimes that catalytic event is that it forces you to see yourself, and it forces you into what we call the dreaded V word, vulnerability. The dreaded V word. Like, I'm not the person who I thought I was.
Amen.
And the theme that I hear, the theme that I hear from Alfred Edmond Jr., who's the senior VP at Black Enterprise, to Cornell Belcher, who was Obama's poster, to Dr. Andre Perry. It's this moment in that you realize that, as Alfred said, I'm not a people pleaser. And I am a people pleaser. And that has dictated how I show up. And I have not taken care of myself. I've taken care of others. For Dr. Anthony Perdue, it was, I moved every year as a child. And I don't even know, because we went to college together, but he was like, we were getting government subsidies, right? He was talking about, he's like, Charles, was like the government cheese. We were getting the government cheese. And basically this move, I was not able to build community. And so I would push people away. It showed up in my relationships. It showed up early on in college. But once I figured out that this was not the way that I wanted to comport myself, right? I had these catalytic events. People were pushing me away. I can't deal with you. I got divorced. This is not who I want. It wasn't my purpose. And Andre said, you know what? I lost great loves because I was being, this gregarious personality. I was being, because what happened is that I was a foster child and I grew up in poverty. And because of that, I put on airs because I didn't want anybody to know that I was poor. Those catalytic events, Dr. Alfiee, Breland, Noble, are what drives these conversations, what drives revolution in men's lives when we have the ability to be vulnerable and say, you know what? I'm not showing up well. I'm not showing up right. And there's something in me that says, I gotta be better.
Ah, wow. Wow. So what I really love about all of this is that you're giving men a platform to be able to have the conversation. And I figure that must be a big part of why you started the podcast, to create that space for men. I have to be honest and say that in my own experience, a lot of times what I find myself doing is going back to, like, I do a lot of stuff on my Instagram page, making videos, and they show up on you, I put them on YouTube and things like that. And I have to be honest, I will often go back and watch the stuff that I say, because there are lessons for me. You know what I mean? Like when I'm talking about meditation and deep breathing, and, somebody was teasing me the other day, this journalist, so I really love, her name's Dami on social media, Dami Michelle. She was like, you are like the personal trainer for the no muscle. Because I'm always talking about no is a complete sentence. And for me, it really is because I had to work through over the years finding my voice to be able to tell people no as an academic, right? And I always tease and say, yeah, I'm a recovering academic. And there's a reason I left it, is because there was something about like that dreaded V word. So when you said that, it hit me, because I was like, yeah, that's what it was for me. That's what made me decide I don't do this no more. Like given 20 years to this. It's not giving me back everything that I'm putting into it. And I did feel that vulnerability. I did feel like, why would I continue to open myself up in a way that's not, forget reciprocated, it's not even acknowledged or taken care. I'm not being taken care of in the way that I should be. I'm not being honored. I'm not being valued. And so what I'm hearing you say is that's very similar to what a lot of these brothers' experiences were. Like they have these childhood experiences, right? Everybody's dealing with recovering from something that happened in everybody, right? From something that happened in childhood. And so to hear you talk about watching and listening to these men tell the story of the arc, all that stuff, I'll say stuff that I was doing as an adult, was all rooted in me trying to run from and hide from the crap that I experienced as a child. And so for me, I think it is healing and wonderful. And I encourage everybody to go out and download and listen to your podcast, What's Your Revolution? Because it's just, I don't know that we as Black people and people of color get enough opportunities to talk about. So even though the focus of yours is not mental health, in a way it sort of is, right? Because people are talking about, this is how I came to be where I am. So I really do just commend you on that, and just say, I don't know, I just want to say thank you, because, brothers just don't have enough opportunity and space to have those conversations. And I'm wondering, from your perspective as a facilitator of all of this, do you feel like you have to do a lot? I think this will be educational for a lot of women or anybody in a relationship, or for parents with boys. Is there anything you feel like you have to do as the host, and the creator of the podcast, to pull those stories out? Or are these men in a place where they're just ready to tell it?
It's interesting. So a couple of things just to answer that question really, really quickly.
Yeah.
I don't have to do much. I asked that first question, what's your revolution? And all of a sudden, it's like, this is my revolution, and this is why.
Yeah.
And what I do is like you, I come prepared, but oftentimes those prepared questions are out the door.
Yeah.
Because I'm hearing this revolution and I'm like, wow, let's dive into this.
Yep.
Brother Jeff Fard came on the show a couple of weeks ago, and his revolution was, he was like, I'm in a 2-foot pool. I got a 3-foot man on my back, and I'm 12 feet tall. How do I not drown? And he said, what people don't understand is that all you have to do is stand up.
Amen.
But we don't realize that sometimes, is that we don't realize the breadth and gravity of who we are as people. Amen. I heard you say, Doc, that academia was not the place. I found that same story, that academia was not, they were not seeing or hearing.
Keep it real. Tell the truth, shame the devil. Go on, tell the truth.
Yeah, they were not hearing and seeing. And so I remember being decisive about leaving. and this is not my place. And, it was interesting before the conversation that we talked about, it's our plan and it's God's plan,
Amen.
right? And God was
Amen.
like, it's time for you to go.
Amen.
It's time for you to go, but this place is not conducive for you. And
Amen.
the fruits of his plan, and the fruits of his plan have led me to my revolution, right? Led
Yes.
me to all of this. But to move away from that for 1 second is
Sure.
interesting, because you talk about women listening to this podcast, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
how this benefits. Our research shows that more women listen to this podcast than our target demographic,
Mm.
because what we've realized is that women want to hear these stories about men so they can show up better,
Yep.
right? Or hear
Yep.
like, let me
Yep.
let
Yep.
me calculate or calibrate how
Yep.
I am interacting with these brothers, so I know a little bit more.
Yep.
Also, the interesting thing, Doc, is that I'm finding that more white women are listening to the show. That is interesting to me.
Okay.
And so the conversation is around is that these are white women who are trying to show up more equitable in the world.
Oh, okay. Okay, that makes sense. I was like, what y'all getting intel? Like, what's that about?
Who are wanting to be more equitable in the world. I've had conversations with 4 or 5 white women over the last week who say, hey, I listened to your show. I'm loving the dialogue. I'm loving learning more about men, black men, but I'm raising boys. I'm raising white men. And I want to make sure that they have the ability to show up better in the world and understand the lived experiences of black men.
That's powerful. That is powerful. Like you said, because God will take you in directions that you're not even expecting to go, right? Like we were joking earlier before we started, we make plans and God laughs. Like I think that's so true. And this idea of, I really am back on this idea of vulnerability. And I think sometimes it is, how are you going to answer the call, right? I put enough stuff in for the universe. It's like, I put all this stuff in front of you. I put these things, I put this, like in your words, a catalytic event. And sometimes a catalytic event is cataclysmic, right? Because you're like, God dang, like it just feels like, it's just like an avalanche. That's how it felt for me when the one thing happened. I was like, I can't do this no more. I'm tired of y'all. Y'all don't appreciate me. Peace out. And I think what happens though is I don't want to make it sound like it was the thing happens and you're like, oh, I'm done. It wasn't that easy for me. And I'm sure for a lot of the brothers that you're describing, even in the story that you told, it wasn't like it was one thing and it was like, boop, I'm going to change. It was like sort of leading up to, and then there was this one big thing where you were just like, okay, now is the time. But, it had to be that there was something nagging at you the whole time. And so I'm stuck on this theme of what do you do after you've been pushed to make the change? And one thing that I like about what you're describing is, in addition to the podcast, your other work that you do is really about walking the walk from having a personal revolution to allowing that, or to using that personal revolution to benefit others. So like you were describing a brother who said, I'm 12 feet tall, I got somebody on my shoulders and the water's not that deep, but I'm, how do I stop from drowning? Well, part of it is you have to stand up. But I think for those of us who are people of color, as you stand up, you pull somebody else up with you, right? That's how we were raised. I know in your house and in my house, that's what it was. You don't just do it for you. You do it for the people around you. So I think about, like, I'm always having to go back to people, remind people, how bomb Virginia Beach is. Rail, Chad, right? Timberland, right? All the people, Missy's from Portsmouth, like just thinking about how even for them, each one of those individuals, there were other people that they brought up with them. Maybe it wasn't a whole lot. Maybe we don't know all of who it is, but there were other people that they brought up with them. And so when they rose, other people were able to rise too. And so I would love to hear more about, for you personally, in addition to the podcast being part of your revolution, I know, and I want our listeners to know, there are other parts of your revolution. And if you would describe a little bit about that for us.
No, I appreciate that. I definitely, shout out to your brother. You talked about lifting as we climb, and the good men of Omega Psi Phi talk about that all the time. You know what I'm saying?
There you go.
Gotta give a shout out to the brothers.
There you go, to the bros, right? Okay, Fitz, he talking to you.
Yeah. shout out to you, dear brother. One of the things, Doc, as I move my revolution from the podcast and knowing that this is about Black men and their stories of transformation and how they're changing their communities in the globe, I get to further, right? I get to take this PhD and move this in and take this PhD and all of my education experiences and move it into a wonderful organization called CamelBack Ventures, which was started by Aaron Walker 6 years ago, helped to be proliferated
It's
by
only
my
6 years
predecessor.
old?
It's only 6 years old.
Oh my God.
We've had 6 classes. Exactly. Helped to proliferate by my good friend and colleague, Elizabeth Bates, and our wonderful team there. CamelBack Ventures is an organization that believes that genius is equally distributed, but opportunity is not.
Amen.
And what we've done over the last 6 years is to actually fund, build, catalyze, and promote, right, 83 ventures that are built by women and people of color in education, education tech, and actually education adjacent technology. And so it is a wonderful thing to think about. I have this wonderful idea. It solves a problem. I've created a tech platform. I've created a nonprofit. I've created a charter school that benefits Black and Indigenous people of color, and it's innovative. It is catalyzing the ability to transform our communities. And you think about this, because we talked at length about Virginia Beach and Green Run and my love of our
Yeah,
high
you
school.
love Green Run.
Yeah,
I
my
love
love.
parts of Green Run. Let me put it like that. Pieces.
Pieces. But yes, I mean, we want community to feel like I grew up in Green Run. I grew up in wherever your community is, because it gave us the ability to thrive. It gave us the ability to ascend to the spaces that you and I have.
Yes.
And I get to work with amazing people who are creating amazing products. I think about Sophie Strand, who talked about Science with Sophie. Raheem was built by Brandon Anderson, which is this wonderful platform that chronicles policing. Alfiee chronicles policing
Wow.
experiences. So you think about big data and advocacy,
Mm.
the ability for communities to say, look, we have aggregated all of these experiences with police, and the police in our community are messed up, or the police in our community are amazing, and go out to the rest of the world and say, this is what happened when everybody doesn't like defund the police. What happens when we move money around,
right? But
Move
that's all
money
it
around.
is. It's not take all the money away from them. I tell people, change defund to demilitarize. If you look and think about it like that, that's essentially what they're saying. Demilitarize the police.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I think about Vanessa Luna with M Schools in New York. I think about my man, Glenn Contab, with Movers and Shakers, who has created, we talk about movement. I mean, monuments coming down in this country, and monuments coming down. But what happens when we as a community can build monuments that look like us, but in an AR environment, Alfiee? Right? So now you have children who have these robust, creative minds creating monuments in this AR environment.
Wow.
Time and time again by Brother Glenn, who's an activist himself. This is your children. Think about our children being able to create monuments of their elders at home.
Yes.
To say, I built this. This is a wonderful thing. And you want to talk about mental health aspect, and I'll let it go from there. But Julio Rivera with Liberate. You've probably heard of it. Liberate app, right? Black meditation for us in 2020. This brother has created an app with teachers. It is the Peloton of meditation apps, bringing in teachers that look like you and me.
Yes.
So that's what I get to do. And you can see the energy that I have for this job, to be able to connect stakeholders and customers and investors and philanthropy and give them knowledge to grow and build these amazing ventures. I get up every day like, damn, this is where you put me. Wow. This is what I got.
Wow.
I get to catalyze this revolution every day.
Oh, there's so much about that that's so beautiful. And I'm so grateful that, you grew up in a house where people gave you a spirit for service, right? That we came from a community, all jokes aside, even if not all of it was great, there were aspects of growing up in Virginia Beach and going to Green Run that were good, that taught me, some really good things. But that you could take all of that and organize it and put it together in a way that allows you to continue to go back and help other people, right? So it's like you said, with the bros, lifting as you climb. And so for any of my listeners who don't know, You can Google it. Omega Psi Phi is a fraternity. It's an African-American fraternity. It's founded at Howard, right? HU.
Howard, yes, that's correct.
HU. Come on now.
November.
You know my school. Love my school.
November 17th, 1911.
There you go. See, like you still all in it. Good grief.
All
I
in,
do good to
all-
say 1908. Ski week to the sorors. Anyway, so I think that it just embodies a lot of what you've been able to do throughout your lifetime, right? So just the whole arc. And I think, well, not I think, but it also is meaningful to me that the leap from academia allowed you to land in a place that values who you are as a Black man, that values what you bring to the table. And not only does it value you, but it gives you the space to be able to create a valuing environment for other BIPOC folks. And that is so critical. And so I just want to acknowledge that and honor that, because there are not a lot of us who get to say that we have the opportunity to help other people, and that helping other people is good for us, right? It's good for our own spirit. So I really love that. But I have to ask, because I always ask this, explain to the people, right? This will be educational for my young listeners. What does it mean to work for a company that's called a venture company? I don't know some of us don't know what that means. What does that mean?
Gotcha. So thinking about entrepreneurship is about building a venture, building a company. So company, venture are synonymous with each other.
Okay.
And so usually that's the next thing that comes out of their venture is venture capital.
Okay.
And so what is the capital that needs to be infused in a venture to actually, and this is the word of the day, to catalyze its growth?
Okay.
And so what CamelBack does is that we give a friends and family round, right, initially, because if you think about this, oftentimes we start ventures out of passion and love.
Amen.
And so, and knowing that the disparities that we see in income that happen in BIPOC communities, oftentimes that friends and family round that our white brothers and sisters have is just not there. Let me raise 150,000 to 500,000 by going around and asking friends and family. Many of us don't have that. And so what CamelBack has done is says that we're going to infuse this friends and family round. We're going to give you coaching, capital, curriculum, community, and connection. Got all 5, Aaron.
Love it.
And yes, over time to help them grow their ventures. And what we've now proposed is that we're not going to leave you. We're not going to just spend 6 months with you. We're going to give you this community that goes on well past the time you leave us. So we believe CamelBack fam, CamelBack for life.
Oh, ride or die.
Ride or die. Think about this, to be able to mesh each other together, to think about your first customers are coming from people who are in this 83 alumni, right?
Wow.
Right. You have connections with investors and stakeholders that I may not have, and you can point them in our direction to say, hey, Vanessa Luna, we got you this, this connection at Gates.
Yes.
Right. Raheem, we got you this connection with some large investor that believes that policing is, needs to be demilitarized, and we need to move around, but we need to prove that this is happening.
Yes.
That's what this CamelBack for life, this CamelBack, family that we are building. And luckily I get to be a part of that, to head that, in this time of COVID, is this ability to bring people together. And it's so amazing to be in service of each other. I love that.
Oh, I love it. And so let me just full stop. I appreciate the education, and so many people will appreciate having this education, particularly the young folks, right? Because you have young people who are activists. And now, let me, for full disclosure, if you're under 30, you young to me. So let me just tell y'all that right now, right? So it's not just the babies, it's the young adults too. And they'll appreciate having the intel to understand when people are talking about something like a CamelBack Ventures, they will know what that is. But I know of CamelBack because of the big infusion from, I don't want to say her name wrong, and I'm not going to call her by her ex's name, but I can't remember, Mackenzie Scott. Thank you. It came to me.
Exactly.
That's how I know who CamelBack is. And I do know the brother that you spoke of. Tell me his name again, who runs it?
Aaron Walker.
Aaron Walker. So I want to get Aaron's name right. I have seen his picture, around on the internet through stories and things. And I'm just really happy that an organization like this exists. And I'm happy again that you were able to give us some education about what it means, right? That whole friends and family round, like round meaning investment. When you go around and ask people for money, that's your round of funding. That is a round of funding. And you're so right. And what people can give, it may not get you to $150 to $500,000. It may get you to $1,000 or $5,000, but you may need much more than that. So knowing that you all exist, and you have all these other pieces that go into it with the support in the community, right, and the coaching and the curriculum and education, that's really important. So I do want to say how much I appreciate all of that and how much I value, my brother that I grew up with is doing this work, is spearheading a lot of this work. So I really appreciate it. So in closing, because I don't want to keep you here all day, what I want to ask you is, are there any things that I forgot to ask you about with my trusty, beautiful, furry microphone here that you wanted to mention? And then on top of that, would you tell us a little bit about where we can go to find you, to find your podcast, to keep up with you, and to keep up with any of the work that you're doing that you want to shout out for us?
Right. No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with my childhood friend, and shout out to your dad, who, was one of my first coaches, baseball
That's
coaches.
right.
Just,
That's right. Coach Breland. He didn't let y'all
Coach
run and gun.
No,
right. He had y'all on fundamentals, and he said y'all hated
exactly.
it.
Man, let me tell you, but your father is an amazing man, a tremendous mentor as a young boy, coming up in the Green Run athletics, and just a wonderful role model for us as young Black boys, and as we ascended. So please tell him I said hello.
I will. He'll love it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your friendship, and throughout we have worked with each other for so long, and I'm just happy to see all the success that you have going on. It means so much to see a queen, doing her thing. I think we touched on the points. The podcast is my passion.
Okay.
And I want to continue to uplift the voices of Black men who are doing amazing things in the world. I think about, yes, having these big boisterous stars on the show, but there's local talent as well. So we don't, we want to make sure that we are hearing the voices of people that you see on the streets or the people that you see on TV as well. So continue. If you all know any brothers who are doing amazing things, please have them reach out to me, and you can find me on Twitter at What's Your WY Revolution, Instagram What's Your Revolution, and Facebook What's Your Revolution. Or you can email me at ccorprew@wyrevolution.com. Just hit me up. Tell me, about what you think about the show. You can catch the show on any podcast medium that we have. So please check us out. And just thank you. And really, really think about, I push people to think about how you can solve a problem. And if you can solve a problem, you can find some value, right, with how you're solving that problem. And then you can make money. Think about, what's going on at CamelBack and the amazing work that we were doing. Shout out to our team, Nadia Morris, Elizabeth Bates, Kelly Solney, Caroline Luke Wicki, Tanya Dahl, Riaz Gossidin, and our founder, Aaron Walker, who are doing amazing things. I want to make sure I got everybody.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Everybody on our team that's doing amazing things at CamelBack. And so thank you for letting me be a part of that and this wonderful work that I do.
Oh, this was just such a breath of fresh air. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to talk on my podcast. I'm looking forward to whatever the opportunities might be to join your podcast, even though you focus on brothers. I can talk about brothers too.
Yes, we got to have you on. I'm already talking to your assistant. We got to make this happen.
Yay! So we're going to make it happen. So Dr. Charles Corprew, we're going to get it right so everybody can say look, if you don't know him like I know him, he is Dr. Charles Corprew to you. Thank you very much. Please and thank you. But that's my friend, Chucky. I'm really proud of everything that you're doing. It just makes me so happy to know that I remember when we ran into each other years ago. I think it was in New Orleans at APA. And I was like, oh, snap, this brother got a PhD. Yeah. Oh, this is awesome. We got a brother with a PhD. I love it. I love it. So everybody got to call him doctor. I'm just kidding. Not really. But thank you so much, Chucky, for joining me. And I'm just really looking forward to seeing all the additional amazing things that you're going to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this time being with you, and good luck with all your success. And any way that I can support you, please let me know.
Absolutely, I will. So there you have it. That's a wrap for another episode of Couched in Color. We want you to know that we deeply value you, all of our viewers and our listeners, and everyone out there working to support optimal mental health, both for themselves and for our young people. And one of the best ways you can help our movement is by leaving us a 5-star review on our YouTube channel and everywhere you enjoy your audio podcasts, and by sharing our podcast with a friend. Please also tag us while you're out there listening and watching. Finally, head on over to dralfiee.com for more information about me, www.acomaproject.org for information about my nonprofit, and those are the places you can go to learn more about how you can help. So I'll see you next week. And until then, I'm going to say what I always say, which is that I'm wishing you lots of love, lots of light, and that I'm hoping it is always, always informed by good, culturally relevant science. Take care.